Oh, friends, here for your listening and enjoyment. Another edition of the Landscape and Gardening Show here on the Alive and Social Network with yours truly, BT Brian Turner, and my esteemed co-host, Bob Harvey from Edelweiss Designs. Hello, Bob.
How are you today?
I am well, given the vibe here in the Alive and Social Network studio just minutes before we started the podcast today. I know your last name is Harvey, but I truly should communicate to our podcast listeners that were you more disposed from a Germanic heritage standpoint, I know truly your last name would be Weisenheimer. Weisenheimer. I know this to be true. Yes, he is one big Weisenheimer sitting across from me.
Well, I don't know about that. I
do.
I cheat a lot. I look up a lot of stuff, but then a trial and error. But we've got a lot to talk about today because, looking out the window, driving in the car, putting your windows up before you go to bed at night to sleep and get that fresh spring air. People are charged. The landscape is charged.
Landscape is charged. A twofold putting your windows up notion here. One is, because I'm notorious for this. So one is making sure you put the windows up in the vehicle before you go to bed at night, because I can't tell. I mean, really, I wish.
Can't you get that raccoon out of the back seat?
Well, I feel so bad. The nest looks so cozy. I don't know why I don't learn in some small slices of my life. I just don't remember to learn, and that's one of them. And I make mental notes. I'll even sometimes, because I just want to air out the car or the truck, and I'll go so far as to put a Post-it note like next to where I plug in my phone, little things like this. But do you think I'll remember? Or, what'll happen is I'll put a Post-it note next to where I plug in my phone to say, remember, go out and roll up the windows on the car before bed. But then it'll be one of those evenings where I'll turn off my phone and just set it next to my bedstand. I won't go and plug it in. So, the whole memory device that I set up to help me remember something is fruitless and useless. Remember two things. Put up the windows in the bedroom, get some of that nice sleeping weather. And we never know this time of year when it might just rain overnight and we didn't know, it wasn't expected, or perhaps it was, but like me, you just forget to do it. Roll up the windows on the car.
And at this time of the year, it's kind of hard to remember a lot of things. Things get really jumbled and chaotic. And
absolutely.
And there's just so much going on. And one of the things we're going to talk about today, remembering, is what? Mother's Day.
Oh, my goodness. Mom's Day is coming up this weekend ahead, so we definitely have to honor Mom. And whether you're able to do it this weekend specifically, sometimes you got to put a holiday off, for a week or so. Just remember that whatever it might be, you might have to work Sunday or this weekend ahead or what have you. Just take some time out and spend it with Mom in this fashion, in this landscape and gardening fashion.
That's right.
Go out with Mom, to roll the windows down, in this instance, in the car.
Let Mom in the car, please.
Don't put her in the back with the raccoon nest. Don't do that. No, let her in. She'll be. I'm sure she'll be fine and wonderful.
Don't forget to let her out.
Yeah, and
when
that too.
Yeah.
And I hope your mom's. I speak for our podcast listeners right now. We hope that your mom is still with us.
Yes.
And if not, we want to honor her memory and try to. What I'm getting at here too is just try to spend some time with a mom. It may be a spouse. It may be, your sister. It may be, just might be a mom in your life. Spend some time with them and let them know how much you appreciate them from that perspective, from that mom perspective. So do that and
right.
make it count. Make it have some meaning.
It doesn't have to be biological.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a significant impact on a person's life, and none of us would be here without our moms.
That's right.
We got to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are a lot of ways to remember our mom. If she is not here with us, we're going to have some suggestions when it comes to our gardens and landscape, ways to remember. And there's just so many beautiful ways in the garden and landscape experience that take us through the journey and the path of sentiment and history and memories that hopefully jog the positive, more fun and enjoyable things, and not the things that, might have interrupted our our path, so to speak, to wherever we were headed. That's called growing up and maturation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. At least in some corners.
So,
and in terms of that maturation, if only memory would, and remembering things like the windows would go along with it. I want to go off on a little mom thing right now.
Good.
From the perspective of Edelweiss Designs. And by the way, you can always reach Bob Harvey at info@Edelweiss Designs, EDELWEISS Designs, plural.com, EdelweissDesigns.com.
Actually, not plural. Edelweiss Design.
Oh, you know what? Why did I do that?
The website is EdelweissDesign.com. We'll get you right there. And then the other information for emails and phone numbers are right there. Just EdelweissDesign.com.
What were we talking about 30 seconds ago about memory issues? I just brain fart.
When was that?
What? Huh?
Was that last show?
What? 30 seconds ago. What did I have for dinner last night? EdelweissDesign.com. Thank you, Bob Harvey. Info@EdelweissDesign.com. When you are out meeting with clients, which happens, of course, for you all the time, especially this time of year, how many of these projects do you encounter a client that says, this plant has to stay? I inherited from my mom. I would think that happens just a lot of different times.
There's a lot of ownership, proprietal rights around a garden or landscape, and particular plant that people say.
I think that's just the coolest. I think that's just the coolest thing. That whole legacy of carrying on a plant that has so much of that affection and meaning to it.
Right, and it's not just the visual. I mean, for instance, right now at the lilacs blooming, where we smell them, and a lot of times people associate that lilac smell with specific times in life or specific events. And it's true. Those things play a very powerful role and drive the design in some ways of not diminishing their importance in the design, in the landscape. So that's really easy to do, and it's a welcome challenge to say we can celebrate these certain elements because they mean so much.
Yeah, and a lot of times that lilac smell comes from the history that you have with a mom or a parent or somebody that just had that in their yard, and so they want to either it's a specific plant that they inherited, or moreover just recreate that memory. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is, I'm glad you brought up lilacs because they are blooming right now, and the smells in the garden are so evocative.
Well, they're one of the most fragrant things going on right now, if not the most fragrant. And one of the memories that I have that I think is so fun, you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money to do something meaningful for someone else.
Yeah.
And to cut the lilacs in a bouquet and take them to a friend, a neighbor, someone else's mom, your mom, whatever the situation is, it just kind of initiates or kind of tickles at you a little bit. It's like, I feel this nudge to do something.
Yeah.
Follow that. Don't dismiss it. If the plants stimulate that in your thoughts and say, I really should do this with cut some plants, some lilacs or tulips, or just do it. You can make a person, and I have experienced it personally, where on both sides, as giver and as receiver, where it means so much, and that's why we look forward to putting these things in our gardens and landscapes so that we plan now, we get them going, and then they're there when we need them.
Yes.
It's no mistake that lilacs come out around Mother's Day, and that's why there's such a significant memory connection there with that particular plant.
Yes, it sure is. Now, just let's put a note out here. Remember that cut those plants only if they're in your yard or garden. I saw more than several notices, Facebook and elsewhere, and hearing from friends that live in certain neighborhoods where big community events are going on, and they'll come home after a day being away and not necessarily, maybe being at that community event, maybe not, but just they're away from home, and they come home and, well, guess what? All those beautiful tulips that I had in the front yard, they're missing, and they're all cut, and you can tell they were scissors cut. Not a bunny or some other critter that was getting at them. So yes, be kind. Just share what you can share, and do so like Bob said, with an open heart, and just move it forward. I grew up in the northwest suburbs. We're on this lilac jag here a little bit. I grew up in the northwest suburbs, the Robbinsdale area. Mm-hmm. Robbinsdale's my hometown, and Highway 100 cuts through St. Louis Park, Robbinsdale, all sorts of communities. Those two specifically in a bigger way, Golden Valley as well. and it's been known for years as Lilac Drive. And the redoing of Highway 100 over the last number of years pushed people in the community and the gardening community in those areas to move forward and replant the sides of Highway 100 with those famed and legendary lilacs. And it's just a beauty to behold and see it once again. It was clustered in a way that was a little more bush-like when I was growing up, just long hedgerows of lilacs. And you get little stretches of it, but I'm here to say that it's still just a wonderful thing to see. And there's lots of them.
There'll be a lot more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah,
too.
I bet too. And just the smell. It's such a luxurious smell to be encountering in a freeway or highway environment. Usually it's in a yard or when things are a little more calm around you. But to have those, even on the highway, to have those windows open on a major highway like 100 is, and to smell that lilac smell is just amazing.
Beats exhaust. Big way. And
it beats out exhaust. That's the funny part.
Yeah,
is
it's
that
a nice neutralizer, odorizer.
It's funny how it just it does beat it out in your it conquers it in your nose and in your brain. That's pretty cool. We do this segment if you're new to the show, the Alive and Social Network and the Landscape and Garden Show with Bob and BT. We do a What's Blooming segment on the show every week, and so
That's
now
right.
we're on lilacs, but let's go into some other areas that are causing us to our eyes to perk up and our noses certainly to perk up as well.
Yeah, it's like a litany. I'll have to go.
Take
There's so
your time.
many
It's all
things
right.
to, and it's just going to accelerate even more
Isn't
this
that
week.
great?
Well,
Yeah.
but look at our situation. We're finally, at least in the air, we're experiencing a moisture level increase. The nosebleeds and the cracked lips needed a break with this 25, 30, 35% humidity
It was
levels.
getting bad, that's for sure.
So the last 24 hours, it's feeling a little bit more like we expect this time of the year in Minnesota. We see some thunder and some rain showers. And the next couple of days, hopefully much needed moisture will be delivered to just so timely, which will accelerate even more things into growth and bloom. So let's talk about what's blooming. And not everybody has a sunny front yard garden or whatever in the backyard kind of thing. Some people have woodland gardens, and there's different kinds of bloom or texture things that emerge this time of the year. And I'm just going to mention a few of them.
As you said, depending on the location.
Right. Because I'm there's so many things that sometimes forego mentioning just because they don't have showy flowers, but they have other things that they can offer. Excuse me.
No worries.
So, but let's start in the woodland area with some of the things that I've noticed, at least on my clients' sites. I mean, it is such an anomaly in woodland areas or in certain areas where I come originally from back east. I'm used to a very floriferous spring experience. It starts early and it goes on.
Word.
And it's concentrated. It's not dabs here and there. And so to replicate some of that, because people are starving for color. And so with all the wonderful local research we have in horticulture and permaculture, that we can come up with varieties that are synonymous but are more acclimated to the Minnesota climate. It gives us the option of expanding our blooming season.
Sure.
And diversifying it as well. So, for instance, in the woodland areas, under some of the shrubs, I think about, it's also called the Mayday tree, which would be the serviceberry tree.
I've got one in my backyard. We've talked about it before.
And there's so many cultivars, and they've been peaking the last 3 or 4 days. Just absolutely wonderful. And in a forest setting, we do a lot of them along forest edges where we have that transition between the dense woods and then out into a more cultivated yard with some beds and that kind of thing, and shrub borders and that kind of thing. Is they kind of float in the landscape behind those beds and with the backdrop of the woods. And so they're kind of this gauzy, fuzzy white, not piercing white, but it's just a soft, elegant, airy. And when you do them in mass, and you have them scattered around in the woodland along the paths and things like that, it's just delightful. The word is delightful.
Let me ask you, because I have one, and it has the multiple trunks coming up. Yep. So are they all like that, no matter what variety, or are there single trunk serviceberries too?
There are single stem serviceberries that, do just as well. They look like they'll get up around 10, 15 feet and have a nice crown on them, and,
Because
the bark is very beautiful on a single stem.
Yeah, because the multiple stem one, like you said, how it blends in and sort of just has that softer transition between something and something. Right. Mine certainly does that, and the place
it's
it is
very
in the
natural
yard.
looking too.
Yeah.
And it invites a lot of opportunity for things that go underneath there that bloom at the same time as the serviceberry, which is really nice. And the woodland plants, certainly you have a lot of options, because in the woodland setting, most of the color and interest is really happening at this time of the year. So the late April through the merry month of May, you can expect a lot of things happening in the woodlands. Let's talk about a few of those. So we talked about the serviceberry is one thing. The red buds, which can take a little bit of the woodland dappled sun to shade kind of thing, are in bloom right now with those little purple and pink pea-shaped flowers. No leaves showing, just little flowers.
Just little flowers.
Lining the stems of the trees. Very delicate. It looks like little pearls. Purple pearls lining the stems. And then in the perennial area with some of the native things as well as other cultivars of ornamentals, we have Mertensia, which is the bluebells. And they just kind of shoot up really fast with kind of a cabbagey looking leaf, but it's very soft. And then the little bluebell stalks open up, and they're beautiful under serviceberries. They're like cousins. They get along really well.
I like that idea. Yeah, and the blue and the white, the contrast between the white flowers on the serviceberry and the blue down below, that would be just beautiful.
And then you have your Dutchman's breeches, which is looks like a little miniature bleeding heart with the fern leaf foliage and these little white flowers that come up that look like a pair of pants. Dutchman's breeches.
There you go. Nice.
And they spread over time. Claytonia, spring beauty is the common name. That's pretty with a little light pink with a star flower in it. That's a native that grows very nicely. The trilliums are getting ready to open, and of course those
one
are
of my favorites.
Treasured. Yeah. And I have a client with an absolutely gorgeous deep burgundy one. It's just stunning. We used to seeing more of the bright white ones, which are absolutely fabulous as well. And
that's a real native Minnesota plant, too.
Epimedium, Epimedium roseum, which is the little pink flower that comes out on the barrymort, and the Epimedium sulphurum, Latin for yellow, is the ones that have the yellow foliage coming out. I mean, they're just delicate. You put them in areas that are real close to your path as you walk through the woods, and they're in bloom right now. And the foliage is kind of bronze colored. So it's really, really interesting. Obviously, there's species tulips that would be all right in a natural setting, as well as the whole narcissus family. So we talk about like the cousins of the daffodils, or daffodils are part of that family. And they, the white ones that are in bloom right now, one variety is called pheasant eye. It's a white, flat white petals with a little tiny circle in the middle that has a yellow center and a red edge on the center. So it looks just like a pheasant eye.
Just like a pheasant's eye. I like that.
And they're very, very fragrant. And then other things that we add in there that are blooming, coming into bloom now would be like pulmonaria, which is a very unendearing common name, lungwort.
Oh, sure.
Lungwort.
I like that plant.
Yes,
yeah.
It's a phenomenal plant.
I like that plant, but I didn't know that was the name.
It serves a lot of purposes, and we're going to talk about that when we get to textures.
Well, it's funny you bring up pulmonaria, so like the pulmonary,
That's right, the chemical,
and
it
lungwort,
is.
And now it makes sense to me.
We forget that so much of our medicine is linked to the extracts of
the plants
and the research that goes around that, and combinations. And so bleeding hearts. Again, very versatile plant. Most people are used to seeing the green leaves and the pink flowers.
Yep. One of Mrs. Turner's favorites.
Yes. Very, very fabulous, reliable perennial. It also comes, one's called Gold Heart, and that is electric in the woodland setting because the foliage is actually a golden lime yellow. And the flowers are pink.
Oh my!
Absolutely stunning.
So you get these two contrasting colors that come out of there,
right?
From the bottomscape of the woodland setting. That's cool.
And you know how bleeding hearts by about midsummer so kind of start to take a dive, but in certain settings and with a little bit of maintenance, but particularly with the gold heart where you have that lime foliage, you can have it hang on a lot longer.
Nice.
The textures. I want to talk a little bit about textures of things that are blooming in the woods. Do you notice the variegated hostas that are just now coming up? They look like soldiers at attention in a circle.
Yeah,
They're just like standing in a circle and the leaves are pointing straight up.
Yep.
And you have that white edge, and what a wonderful contrast setting to your spring bulbs if we plant in between those clumps. So right now the peak color would be the variegation of the foliage we're borrowing from the hosta against the red or the pink tulips and the bleeding hearts. And so you get this riot of color.
Oh, I like that.
And it's really, really exciting. The same thing with the pulmonaria, because you get that spotted color and texture on the leaves. And the flowers are lovely as well. But again, the rest of the season, the foliage of the pulmonaria is fabulous.
So I'm digging that. I've got a big circle area in the one corner of my backyard landscape. And in that circle, I just put a whole bunch of variegated hostas because my good friend Warren was doing some remodeling at his house, and he has tons of them. You want to take them, dig them up, bring them home, and I did. And so I just needed to get them in the ground. And so I did. So it's just a nice big just shock of green and white. But now I know I'm going to pull some of those out and put them elsewhere in the landscape. That's what I'm going to do is find some of those plants that will contrast and work side by side in that texture and color fashion. Yes. That's a great idea. I'm loving that.
I'm kind of funny about the whole use of hostas in a design because it's a really good, easy trap to fall into when in doubt plant hosta.
Yeah.
I've seen them grow out of cracks in the concrete. I've seen them sit on top of driveways with daylilies over a very cold winter and still bloom in the spring. So, but I tend to value them greatest in the spring more than the rest of the summer. There's certain other types of specimens, the big blues and things like that. You can really have some fun stuff going on. Those are show pieces. But when we're talking about that textural thing, and in the spring, to have that green and white variegation, some of them are more yellow, lime, that is really a wonderful backdrop. It's an opportunity for you to do other things in the spring to accentuate what the hostas are offering.
Sure.
So that's just one little sidebar. Same with pulmonaria, same with Brunera, which is wonderful. There's one called Jack Frost, a silvery, kind of a clown's face shaped leaf on it, and then the little blue forget-me-not kind of flowers. Those are starting to open right this week. And so there's plenty that you could have going on in a shadier woodland setting. Yeah. One last thing I want to mention, too, in the woodland setting is we usually use many varieties of astilbe in our shadier part sun situations. Again, some of the varieties of astilbe have a very, very dark burgundish red color, especially when it's first coming up in the spring. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a hosta astilbe kind of thing, you think about different cultivars that they emerge fairly quickly. So you're getting some cover quick in the spring, and you get the red and the green and the white, and you've got color and interest going.
And you've got some interesting contrast there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then what I do when summer comes, and if you have the sea of, just the more common red or green and white hostas, is that's when you take the opportunity, instead of trying to plant in between us, there's a lot of competition, is set some containers in amongst the hostas.
Oh, sure.
And elevate the color off of so it's not fighting with all that, because they get
in the soil. It's going to have its own soil.
The variegated hosta can really shout after it's fully emerged and it's completely covering an area.
Yeah.
So then you can elevate some color of interest and stuff above that, or plant some perennials that are going to grow up above them and offer some contrast.
Or, as I said, like I'm thinking of doing, just make some room. Move a few of those guys out of there and find the strategic areas in my case, that circle, where I just want some of that to happen alongside of it.
We'll have a whole segment where we're just going to talk about what do people do with shade challenges and under what kinds of trees and that kind of thing. What's the best scenario?
I will share this, though. I'm a little torn, too.
Yeah?
Because I do like, in certain areas, and depends on the landscape and what have you, but I do like sometimes when there's just one swath of one thing. And so that I really came to like and appreciate that just that big, beautiful green and white circle, as it was created last year. But I think I'm leaning more in the direction of adding a little variety to it. But I do like that look, too.
Well, what it does is it brings order, and it's also in the context of scale. The size and scale of the area and the surround. If we do a lot of little fussy little things and we have a really large area to work with, they get lost.
Yeah, okay.
It's like going down the shelves in the garden center or whatever and going, oh my gosh, this is overload.
Yeah.
You have to have some order and assembly. So you put the anchors in and you let some of the things predominate and create a place for the eye to rest before it moves on to the next thing. Let's go on the sunny side of things and talk about, again, lilacs and red buds. Full sun, loving it right now. Honeysuckle, all different varieties. There's a lot of varieties now that are out and available that do not have the issue with the mites, like the old varieties that your grandmother had. So you can still have the sentiment, but you might have to change cultivars a little bit. That's what our research does, is gives us more disease-tolerant selections. Horse chestnut trees. Noticing in the last few years, particularly 3+ years, seeing a lot more horse chestnuts being planted, or some people refer to it as buckeye. There's some confusion about labeling here, but what we have is with the horse chestnut, the flowers are actually opening as we speak right now. There's one right out the window on the boulevard over there. And I've noticed the park board planting a lot of those around the lakes. They add another element amongst the forest diversity that is really interesting. The leaves are very interesting. The flower heads stand straight up on the ends of the branches, and a small tree that's only 10 feet tall will have 25 blooms on it.
Isn't that lovely?
And that's really, really fun to see when really there aren't any other trees per se in bloom other than the ones I just mentioned. And we talked about serviceberry because they can grow. I wouldn't recommend planting them in absolute full sun where there's high heat and stress factors. Serviceberries like a little bit of protection around them.
I do have a neighbor's tree that's sort of glomming over my serviceberry space, and you can see that the tree on that side is saying, I'm not growing as much as I could. And unfortunately, it's just some more, not productive branches on the tree next door. And, what do? How neighbor, could you get up there and trim that back a little bit? And, no, they can't. They're renters, that sort of thing. But, the serviceberry is still holding its own. And, it's good to have it in that a little more secluded area.
And then one of the things that we can safely rely on in this part of the country are the crab apples. And they're opening as we've noticed this last week or so.
Boy, are they ever.
They are. And, I'm looking forward to the temperatures cooling a little bit when we get a little moisture because I don't want them to just blow. There are varieties of crabapple that I do not plant in our designs just because they bloom for 6 minutes.
And that's it, yeah.
And
you want something with a week or two.
If you're going to wait, 364 days, and then, you get 1 day. So there are some varieties that have better retention with the petals, and I recommend some of those varieties. I'll just mention a couple.
Please.
In the pink varieties, I like the Coral Burst. It's a smaller size tree, beautiful symmetry. No pun intended, symmetry. And
Weisenheimer, see what I tell you?
Corally pink color. It blooms a little bit on the later end of the crabapple blooming season, so it can extend your crabapple blooming season.
Now, how high will that crown get when you say it's not a super tall tree?
15 max.
Mm-hmm.
One that gets a little bit bigger that was developed here is Prairie Fire, appropriately named. A real dark bark and a very dark berry that comes at the end of the summer, small, burgundy colored. Dark green leaves and a medium-sized to deep magenta flower. That's does great retention and very, very, very pleasant, fun tree to have.
A little more offbeat for an apple like that because, like you said, the petals are a little darker. We usually see them a little more on the lighter and pinkish side, light purple side.
The most that we see, like Red Splendor, is an older variety, and it has a little deeper pink in it. And then you get into some of the other varieties that are a lighter pink, and some that are no longer in circulation that some of these older specimens represent. Then another one that I like that I planted actually next door, and I've used it quite a bit, is called Velvet Pillar is one, and it's burgundy kind of leaves that stay burgundy all summer, and medium pink flowers. Comes a little later. It's just another contrast. So again, when summer comes, instead of the leaves being just green,
see, I'm liking the sound of that already.
They have that deep bronze color, which is really,
I'm liking the sound
really
of that.
Nice. And So there's just a few examples there. In our flower and perennial category, we have pasque flower, which is pulsatata, which is a native, and that has been going on for, I bet, 3 weeks or more in some settings, where the fuzzy foliage and then this beautiful, almost wine cup shaped flower, blues. It also comes in other colors. Hardy, native, performs so well and has deserves pride of place in the garden, near a path or an edge, takes heat well. Primrose is the whole primula family. There's all different varieties. Won't get into them right now, but those are starting to bloom. Creeping phlox, most of the people know that, hangs over the walls at the pink, the purple, and the white. That's opening up and doing very well. Armeria or thrift, pink thrift, is a little tiny stems with little pink balls on the top of flowers that are blooming now. Love it. Dianthus, the whole Dianthus family is getting ready to explode. Some of the early varieties are already opening. Spring iris or Iris intermedia, some of the dwarf varieties. As soon as their little leaves come up out of the ground, the flower is right behind them. So, and our columbine. Columbine in the woodland settings, the native Canadian, but you get all the cultivars, the Biedermeier, and there's McCanna hybrids, and there's a lot of different varieties. If you're really, some people focus on certain perennials or certain varieties of perennials that they have every, like lilies, they have every kind of lily. Yes. Yeah. So those are the things that are blooming right now, and there are others that I probably did not mention. But
it's a good list right there, both woodland and sun oriented here on the Landscape and Garden Show with Bob and BT. Hey, Bob, we're at the halfway mark of our program today. I want to take a quick moment to welcome the newest member of the Alive and Social Network, Tom Smith, mortgage guy Tom Smith.
Great.
Every Thursday, we're posting a new show for your listening enjoyment every Thursday. The show is called Mortgages and BS. Mortgages and BS. So there's some helpful information from the home finance and mortgage side, and then there's just some good stories, hence the BS part of it. There's some good stories about what's going on in the community, people in the community, some ideas about things that are happening in the world right now. It all revolves around, though, what happens with you in the world and your home, and that's why the show is an important one to check out. Mortgages and BS with Tom Smith, and yours truly. I'm co-hosting that show with Tom. It's a real treat to be doing it. And again, podcast and posted every Thursday here on the Alive and Social Network. Good stuff. Bob, here's what we still have to cover on our show today. We want to get into some tasks, some of those to-do lists. We want to get into some annuals and perennials, pruning and such as well. I know we want to do a little bit about repellents, and you brought an example of a really cool. I want to get to that. And then as time permits, we got to get into roses, and most certainly, as we talked about at the top of the show, Mom's Day. And mom's plants and all that kind of stuff. So let's get to it with our to-do lists. Let's begin with the lawn and composting. Let's start right there, my friend.
Well, everyone's out, as you can see, from the lawn companies to the ones that mow, to the ones that blow, to the ones that fertilize, and sod is now available as of this end of last week. And most of it's grown in the same kind of conditions. It's a mix of mostly sun tolerancy, because germination-wise, that's what they need, and to make the sod really well networked and strong, that the sun seed varieties are the ones that are the best, the bluegrass and other mixes in that. And so people can sod now, keep it moist. We aren't getting enough natural rainfall, so we want to get it moist. And hopefully your sprinkler system's on by now, if you do have one. And it's a good time to tweak it, evaluate areas that maybe are not getting enough water, make those adjustments. That's what those people do. That's what we do, and we help people in full service property management. We are tweaking all those things at a very, very detailed level.
Should we have rain gauges set up if you don't have one? Should you get one?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Rain sensors can save you a lot of money. And there's also, we can talk about this in our next segments, just the new technology that's been entering the whole irrigation field, and how we can use less water and still get the kinds of results that we need in terms of meeting those water needs.
Boy, that's important,
it's
especially
very
now.
Interesting thing there. So that'll be one of our topics. And then seeding, overseeding, but get that soil and compost mix if you'd like, and top dress your lawn, fill in those divots and those areas that are looking kind of sad, and get that seed down. I'd say today, if you got it done, you've got the next couple of days of natural rain that'll really lock that in. So composting the gardens. That's what we've been doing. We've been edging and fluffing and tilling and working in between, the emerging plants and getting the compost down, getting it around the roses, doing our final prune on the roses, making sure there isn't any inferior stems and things like that might not look like they're going to do much. So get those things out of there and concentrate on the stems and canes of the roses that are going to be really doing their job. Also, a lot of people don't know this, but if you've planted daffodils and tulips and hyacinths, they are heavy feeders. We get to enjoy the big, beautiful blooms. Well, it takes a lot of energy to be able to produce those. And then you're planning on them doing it again next year.
So you got to give them the energy to do it and then to get ready.
Fertilize those bulbs. Fertilize those bulbs. And as the tulips go by, now there are many tulips that just aren't good repeaters in terms of coming back next year. You'll get the leaves, which is very frustrating with no flower. But there are some varieties, particularly I can think about the Darwins and some of the species tulips that are very reliable, but they need food too. So the compost around those, or actually apply a low-level fertilizer, they'll be very glad to get that, and they'll store up that energy with those leaves before they die away and shrivel up. Don't cut the foliage, or you will be death sentence for the tulips, particularly, and the daffodils. Just leave the foliage die back, and we'll be talking about that in the future as that happens.
Yeah, they got to draw in that photosynthesis, and they've got to store that energy by doing that.
It's a good idea to fertilize the bulbs if you want good repeat.
Irises too, all those bulb plants.
Yes, when they're in bloom and they're heading down. That if you haven't done it on the front end, do it on the back end. Okay. Now we're planting. We're lining out perennials and annuals. Is this the turn in the weather? I just want you to know the last 2 or 3 days, the next 2 days last year were some of the coldest in May with snow. There were still snow piles in the front of my house on the north side, and we had snow falling. So this is quite a contrast to what we experienced this time last year.
I did a Cinco de Mayo event yesterday, and we were talking about how last year was a little bit different weather and a little bit different landscape because there was still some snow on the ground Cinco de Mayo last year.
That's right. And so there are two approaches when it comes. I'll talk more specifically now about perennials. And the garden centers are it's interesting. Without mentioning any names, there's certain locations that they really planned well and knew that this early spring was coming. Mother's Day's, fairly early compared to some other years. You could be more close to the 15th of May or whatever. It's on the 10th this year. And so early spring, early Mother's Day, ching, ching, got to get that stuff out there. People want to buy it. They are so ready and so charged. So the varieties and the selections are outstanding. And again, it can be overwhelming. But if you know what you're doing and you have a direction and you have a plan.
A plan, important.
That you know how to do things in the right order and when to do them and not to panic. Mm-hmm. So this window right now, I think about some of the perennials that are going to be coming on fairly quickly in the early summer or late spring. And think that like things like columbine and stuff, if you're buying these things right now, getting them in the ground as fast as you can and getting them established will help them grow bigger and also produce some flowers yet this season.
Nice.
So foxgloves, delphiniums, some of those things that they really need a long time to get their root systems established and their crowns so that they really produce big stalks of flowers. Get them in sooner than later. Don't hesitate on those. Roses, the same thing. We've been planting roses since, we're 2 weeks now, been planting roses, depending on varieties and cultivars, the hardies, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But compost mixed in with the soil, proper planting techniques, don't plant them too deep, and keep them very well watered. Selections are quite good. Trees, still can do your trees. We've got a great planting season going if you keep things watered, if we don't get natural rainfall. Also, evergreens. We have several large tree orders. Like we plant trees that are 15, 20 feet tall.
Sure.
So there's some are spaded in, some are putting them with large bobcats or lulls, as we call them, to get them to the right location. So they just stopped digging. Most growers have just stopped digging all their evergreens, like the spruce trees, the pines, the balsam firs, those kinds of things, because they're getting ready to flush out that growth, that new green growth. And you want to have those trees, they want to have them up and dug and containerized before they go to market. Because if you plant these trees or transplant them at the wrong time, they can die, because that green foliage is so tender when it's coming out. If it doesn't survive the transplant, then the tree will die. It needs this year's growth to survive. So that's just a little sidebar on evergreens. We have 2 windows of planting evergreens. So one would be right now. Go and get your yews and the containers and the junipers and the rhododendrons and those kinds of things, cypresses, microbiotas, all kinds of wonderful evergreen options. Get them in the ground as quick as you can. And then the next time, we don't like to plant evergreens during the heat of the summer.
By no means, yeah.
High sun angle, very strong, intense heat. Weather's kind of unpredictable, can get droughty. Then we do it again in the fall. We'll talk about fall planting, obviously, when it becomes more timely.
I got to think that a lot of folks are still maybe evaluating some of the replacement evergreens that they need to do as well, because we did have the big polar vortex a season ago, and that caused a lot of browning and wilting and a lot of problems. And then for me, I can speak, the little dwarf Alberta spruce that I had issues with because of the polar vortex a year ago, and I went in and cut out some of the bad stuff, and I like where it is and the distance that spruce is from where I'm visualizing it. The green that's still there sort of gives me a unique texture on it, so I think I'll keep it there one more season, but I know I need to replace it eventually because of the issues.
Right. See, the jury is still out on some evergreens of whether they're going to make it or not, whether they're going to come through. And that'll become clear here in the next week or so when those buds or candles start to push.
Yep.
And if they don't open up, those little brown end buds don't start turning green, you've got problems. And damage could be tissue damage above ground. It also could be root damage.
Yeah.
So, and it could be varmint
damage.
It could. A lot of varmint damage as well. So, don't give up on them yet, but chances are you're going to be probably doing some replanting. Now, last thing on the task list that I wanted to mention was there's still time to do some pruning on your summer blooming shrubs. So mainly hydrangeas, weigelias. I think of those specifically. There are a few others. Clethra. You can get those shaped the way you want. Cut all the old dead blossoms off that are still hanging on, and get those, and go down a little bit and get to some good size stems. I always say the size of a pencil. Like in roses, they say if it's bigger than a size of a pencil, will hold a bloom like a tea rose. That's kind of what you're going for.
Okay.
So that's important. And then also, this is a perfect time to book your meetings for consultation with Edelweiss Design. Also, putting a design and estimate together for a project. We are still booking projects, and it is like tsunami season for us. But we have a lot of things that we can still offer.
And a lot of these projects, too, as we had a couple of your guys come in on a recent show, a lot of these projects are multiple year type projects where you set up an appointment, you got something in mind that you want to do, you set up an appointment, you start doing the ideation process right now, you start surveying the landscape, you might be building a new house or maybe putting an addition on, you want to do some landscaping around that and then work it into another broader project. So you start the project this season, get your appointment to start the project, and then you continue with ideas throughout the winter ahead. And then you guys and the client are ready to spring into action when springtime comes.
In the right order.
And ready to go, and then really bang out that project in more of an April, May, June perspective, so that, next year, for instance, then July, August, September, October, you're enjoying the fruits of this thinking process and this desire to have a living organic space that's, bigger and better and more integrated into your life.
I can think of 2 examples right now where projects we're implementing now weren't even existing on the landscape. They're new construction, but we started the process last year. So now we're implementing. So that's the planning part, and it will go in stages. And then we have a townhouse association over in Edina that we're doing a master plan for. Now, they cannot implement all that at once because it's tied to their association fees and things like that.
And you can only do so much at a time as well.
Exactly. You just can't go clear cut and start over kind of thing. So we'll be prioritizing and multi-phasing that based on budgets and on timing and that kind of like when do they want certain areas done, the higher profile areas come first, or the things maybe there's drainage issues or could be safety issues, that kind of thing, sidewalks have sunken or that kind of thing. So that synthesizing all that information into a workable plan that takes a chronological path as you implement is very, very important.
And of course, I know you have clients that want to do some of the things themselves. They're gardeners. They want to be out there doing it. So you come up with that plan that includes what Edelweiss Design is going to do, and then also what the client wants to do and the things that they're able to do. And then you put them all together. Then you keep everybody happy and busy and feeling like they're contributing to what's happening there, especially the client, because they want to feel like they're a part of what this is. And then you move the whole process forward as a cohesive, planned, whole environment that's going to be a part of what you bring into your world.
That's really fun for some people to have that are do-it-yourselfers, but they really know they don't know quite enough to be totally confident and just enough to be dangerous.
That's kind of me, Bob, when it comes to my landscape.
So we're the intervention people.
We've got about 15 minutes left in this intervention on the Landscape and Garden Show, and thank you for that. I really want to make sure we talk about the repellents, and of course, we got to save some time for Mom's Day. We might get a little time for roses here, but talk to our podcast listeners and share with us that you brought that repellent in. That you had me smell it as we walked into the studio today. And it's just got this.
And you didn't throw up.
But you know what I thought was awesome and amazing was that I went cautiously, and I was expecting perhaps, a little more of a chemical edge to it, and there was absolutely none of that at all. There was no chemical edge to this animal repellent at all, and the reasons why you'll explain.
I will explain, and there's two kind of scenarios that I want to address here. One is we may have a palette in our landscape where we know some of it is like Ponderosa salibar to deer, rabbit, voles, moles, raccoons, squirrels. And so we want to work with what we already have. We don't want to rip it out because, we like it
we want to
and we want to be able to keep it. So that's where repellent approaches come in and other physical protection measures can take place. And then the other palette scenario is what are those plants that we can reliably use for the most part that will not suffer the ravages of the animals.
Okay.
So we can start with treating with what we have. So we have used a lot of different products. They all have their certain levels of effectiveness. They have application rates, how frequent you do it. And again, it's just a matter how important is it to you. I always err on the side of proactive versus reactive. I don't want to see the damage and then go out and go, okay, how can I get my tulips back?
Right.
Well,
they're gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
So this is one thing that because the increase in concern from clientele that really wanted to reduce chemical usage, as we did philosophically, transition to a way where we can be more on a preventative end of things, and that would combine using something that wasn't harmful chemically to pets and to plant material and things that would stay in the soil, as well as using plant material that would not be the first choice for damage or for grazing. So we tried a lot of different products, and we still use a lot of different products because I think part of the magic or part of the psychology of doing this with particularly the deer is that you want to keep tricking them because they're creatures of habit.
Sure.
And so if you just keep doing the same thing, they're going to eventually figure out.
Find workarounds, yeah.
Exactly. So you want to mix it up a bit and try different things or combinations of things. What I'm going to focus on is just one specific product now. We don't have time to talk about all of them. But this one was one that was recommended to me by an ortho rep because I said, I'm really looking for something that can be on the end where I'm not dealing with toxic chemicals.
Right.
So this is called Animal Be Gone.
Animal B, G-O-N, gone.
G-O-N. Animal Be Gone. I picked this one up at Home Depot. It's available at other sources as well. And it just says all-purpose animal repellent granules. This is a granular form.
Let me take a look at it.
It also comes in a liquid form.
Okay.
And that can be put into a spray applicator where you might want to cover foliage and things like that. Now, you just smelled that again. And what's your reaction?
It's got rosemary in there. It's got some mint smell in there. A little bit of cinnamon in there.
Peppermint.
But it's just not chemical at all. I mean, it just doesn't come across. It just comes across as very fragrant. Not that I'd use it. Not that I'd spread it around the house.
Yeah.
But
do not give that to your wife or your mother for Mother's Day.
So there you go. Rosemary, cinnamon, peppermint. I'm looking at the active ingredients. And putrescent whole egg solids. Putrescent.
Yes, the putrescent egg solids is common in a lot of the animal repellent.
Okay. Just
mixes.
enough of a smell that they just, there's a little bit of sulfur in there,
Yeah. It's just, it makes things taste really bad.
Yeah, okay.
And it is aromatic too, but you don't smell it in this.
No, no, I'm not getting any of that, sort of rotten egg smell, but really, it's just, it's amazing how it smells.
So what we've done, we plant between 15 and 20,000 bulbs every fall amongst our projects.
Sure.
And protecting those and getting the amount of losses down. We tried this year for the first time, almost exclusively. We used some other product, but this was like 80% of the time. We went every week and we put it down. That smell that you smell, I wish people could smell it over the media, but go to the store and check it out.
Yeah.
You will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it really is amazing.
It worked. We had like less than 1% any kind of losses on our bulbs. I mean, it's really amazing. If you were diligent and you put it down, either the liquid application or the granular, it's about $12-13 a bottle. It's worth it. And just real happy with the results.
And it says on the front here and on the back a no stink formula, but interestingly they mean no stink,
right?
But they should have put in rather pleasant smell formula, because it really does have a pleasant smell. Rabbits, groundhogs, squirrels, other small herbivores, the moles, the voles, they're all going to be repelled.
So when you're dealing with the deer, you want to use the probably the more the liquid. The liquid.
Get it up on the leaves.
Get it up on if it's up off the ground. If it's low to the ground, here's the deal.
Granular.
These kinds of things that have high aromatic scents, particularly in the mint family and the ones rosemary, cinnamon, peppermint, they irritate the olfactory senses of these animals. They just can't get close to it. You don't see them eating chives, onions, some of your mint family.
Yeah, sure.
They don't touch this stuff. They
them.
don't like the strong aromatic nature of those plants.
But your tulips,
yum yum,
smorgasbord.
Yeah, especially when they're young. So to put this out there, just been real pleased with it. It is safe to put around with pets, and safe for plants.
Nice.
So it doesn't go into the plant material and cause any kind, like for your vegetables and things like that.
Right.
So you create what I call like a vapor barrier. So with that, and they get close to the smell and they're out of there.
Away they go.
Yes.
Away they go. We got a few minutes to dial in on Mom. We got to get into Mom.
Here's a couple gift ideas for Mom. And we're going to talk, of course, the rose is very, very...
It's so traditional, too.
It has so much symbolism, and we have different categories of roses.
Okay.
So if you're a gardener and you like working with roses and you don't want to fuss, then I would stick with the hardy varieties of roses.
Or in this case, if Mom's a gardener.
Right, or if Mom's, yes. Or yes. So I divided into about 3 or 4 categories. So we have the hardy roses, plenty of varieties available. Hybrid tea roses is what the ones that get buried or tilted and that kind of thing. And they have the traditional names, and I'll cite a few of those. And then the David Austin series, which is also the English roses. I have some that are hardy for us. They come from Europe. Very old-fashioned roses. And the Queen's God, and, you know, and Giverny and all these different places around Europe and around the world. And then Floribundas, which is one that has multiple flowers on the same shrub. They may be a little bit hardier. I've had some come back with some protection. I think of 3 specifically in the Floribundas. I like Floribundas because if you have time to work with cultivation of these tender ones, they reward you with so many blooms for so long. I mean, 4 and 5 months.
Wow.
So Iceberg is one that people know. Julia Child.
Not bad.
Julia. So this rose is gorgeous. A pure, beautiful, bright yellow.
It's delightful.
It's delightful. You want to eat it. And then another one talking about Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful rose that has kind of a orangey and lavender combination. Really kind of a hot, kind of interesting.
Cool.
But those are wonderful Floribundas, and my absolute favorite if you can find it. And this is the charge for you out there, you listeners, to find this rose.
Okay.
Passionate Kisses.
Nice.
Really nice rose.
What kind of look is that?
Ooh. Fits the bill.
Sort of a luscious red? Is that
no,
what's going on,
it's a wonderful pink, but it's not a
cloying pink.
Yeah. It just goes on and on and on and on. Every client I've ever used it for has been absolutely.
So again, 4 or 5 months of blooming on that bad boy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Keep that fertilizer down there. Keep that compost going on there. They need the energy. Keep them well watered, but not over watered by no means. You know, be careful on the water on the roses. But Passionate Kisses. Are you saying search it out and seek it out because it's a little difficult to find, or you just got to seek it out?
Yeah, I've had a hard time finding it locally. You could order
it
through Weeks Roses or some of the direct mails that you can get it. And for people that want something other than roses, something still elegant, I think about things like, and if you have a situation where it's a shade garden, I would give bleeding hearts. I would give hydrangea plants.
Yeah.
And those are wonderful. They're still classy, nice. They can be repurposed. So it's nice to give something that keeps on giving, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's why we go in this particular sector, we're dealing with things that grow and live, and the gifts can do the same thing. So those are some ideas there. Hydrangea also for sunny locations works as well. The roses is something that people get intimidated by, and it's getting so much easier all the time.
And what makes it easier? Why?
Well, what makes it easier is the research and development just done right here in Minnesota and areas close to us, like up in Canada, has developed several hardy varieties of roses or categories. And I'm going to list them for you. There's 4 major categories of hardy roses. The first is the Explorer series. The Explorer series was developed in Ottawa, the experimental station, named after the Canadian explorers.
There you go.
These roses are extremely hardy and are repeat bloomers and show salt tolerance. So there are things like Climbing William Baffin and John Davis. These are really tough roses. Parkland series. The Parkland series is developed at the Morden Research Station in Canada. These roses consist of complex crosses with native prairie roses, which is really interesting. A lot of single petal ones may freeze back to the snow line, but they come right back after that. And they don't particularly require any kind of extra protection. So that's kind of nice. So Winnipeg Parks is an excellent example. I have one I just put in my yard this week, and you won't be disappointed by it.
Given the names here, and like you mentioned, Ottawa, Winnipeg, I'm thinking, yes, the tolerance and the ability to
not have to fuss. You think it's colder up there than down here?
And you don't have to fuss with it too much to get it ready for the next season. I'm loving this.
And they show good disease resistance. The next one, number 3, is probably not as familiar to people as the Buck series.
Okay.
The Buck series was developed by Dr. Griffith Buck at the Iowa State University. These beautiful roses are very fragrant and have flower qualities similar to hybrid teas and Floribundas. So for people that's still looking for that hybrid tea look, there's one called Carefree Beauty that's been around a while. 3 foot tall, hot pink, very, very reliable. And the last category is right here in our backyard, the Easy Elegance series. developed by the Bailey's Nursery in St. Paul.
Nice.
When I first came to Minnesota, they were gracious enough to offer me my first job.
Is that right?
While I was in graduate school at the university, and I worked in all different departments at Bailey's Nursery and really got a real feel of how that operation at that time was going.
Sure.
Of course, it's so much larger
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Fabulous folks. Have the highest regard for them. They have roses bred for their easy care, hardiness, and superior disease resistance. So a yellow rose, like high voltage, beautiful yellow rose. Music box, that would be a great Mother's Day rose called Music Box, and they are
I
available.
love the sound of it, too.
Yes. Champagne Wishes. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy elegance rose. Very, very and all these I've used, so I'm familiar with their performance.
And I'm going to say giving Mom a Champagne Wishes rose as opposed to a Passionate Kisses rose probably makes, just on the surface, a little more sense.
Right.
Mom might get the joke, but others might not.
No, I understand. So, that you want more suggestions? We got them. We got enough to go on. Sunrise Sunset. That's another one of my favorites.
Oh, I love that.
Developed right here. Beautiful, beautiful rose.
I love the Fiddler on the Roof reference to that.
When you go and look at
well.
some of our pictures at our website, you'll see some of these.
Well, do it.
used
Go to
in the
Edelweiss
landscape.
Design, singular. EdelweissDesign.com and take a peek at some of those lovely roses. Bob's going to compile some great ideas for next week's show. I'm going to take a moment and do a little more huffing on that Ortho Animal Pecan as we thank you for joining in for another edition of the Landscape and Garden Show with Bob and BT. We'll see you next
BT.
week. Thank you, my brother.
Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.